Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are. Today, we have interpretation services available in English, Arabic, and Spanish. Choose the language you prefer by clicking on the little interpretation icon that appears below your screens. I'm Ana Lucia Jacome, Senior Project Leader at the Division for People and Social Inclusion at UNITAR. I coordinate the development of training tools focused on anti-corruption. I remain at your disposal in case you want to explore possible synergies. This timely event is co-organized with the Global Organization of Parliamentarians Against Corruption, GOPAC. Now, it's a pleasure to introduce you the moderator, Mr. Alex Mejia, the Director of the Division for People and Social Inclusion, and the Director of the International Training Centers for Authorities and Leaders, CIFAL Global Network. Besides of his experience working at the UN, he worked for years at the private and public sector, including as the Vice Minister of Economy of the Republic of Ecuador. He served as alternate governor to the International Monetary Fund, to the World Bank, and to the Inter-American Development Bank, as well as a member of the board of directors of Ecuador's Central Bank. Please, Alex, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear Ana Lucia. It's quite an honor to be able to address a distinguished audience. There is some echo, but I simply was saying that it's quite an honor to be able to speak on behalf of UNITAR, the United Nations Agency for Training and Research, in front of a distinguished array of speakers and, of course, a global audience of more than 150 practitioners and parliamentarians from around the world. So allow me to share briefly a few remarks until we actually have our two principals from GOPAC and from UNITAR taking the floor. I welcome you to this virtual roundtable entitled Parliaments Using Technologies for Combating Corruption, Fostering Transparency and Partnerships towards the UN Summit of the Future. As most of you will know, the United Nations has a mandate to galvanize, to motivate, to foster dialogue among stakeholders, not only member states, but everyone willing to listen and being willing to be part of a global dialogue towards what we call the big issues of our societies. Corruption is one of them, unfortunately. And the role of parliaments in combating corruption is critical and of the utmost importance. So in leading up to the United Nations Summit of the Future next year, this webinar is more than timely, also strategic. So allow me to mention that the United Nations also has developed a roadmap for digital cooperation focused on 8 areas, among others, to strengthen digital capacity building while recognizing that many countries and citizens, in particular from least developed countries, and allow me to focus on that, we want to focus on those that perhaps are ignored by the development trends. We want to focus on the countries that actually need to fight corruption as the highest, #1, above everything else, priority. So everyone is concerned, global north, global south, as they say, but we have a focus on building capacity in LDCs, LLDCs, and SEEDs, least developed countries, landlocked least developed countries, and small island developing states. And the reason is very simple. These countries, I come from one, are unfortunately deprived of capacities and skills crucial to the digital era and to attaining the Sustainable Development Goals. Progress has been made since Agenda 2030 and the SDGs began to function as a roadmap, but there is still a lot to do. And as most of you will know, we are in the middle of the process and in the middle of the period between 2016 and the year 2030. There is a need to accelerate the focus on Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development. There is a need to accelerate on whatever must be done to attain the Sustainable Development Goals. And corruption remains a central global fight that we simply want to support as members of GOPAC or as UNITAR by building the capacity and the expertise that is needed to fight corruption properly. So I wanted to simply give you some general remarks. We will have, as I say, our two principals joining us soon. But the general objective of this roundtable is to learn more about existing technologies that can serve to parliamentarians for combating corruption in the framework of digital cooperation, while making visible possible synergies to foster transparency and partnerships towards the UN Summit of the future. With that, I would like to thank you, all of you distinguished speakers, and I would like to thank you, all of you members of the distinguished audience that are joining us today. And I would like to go back to the facilitator, Ms. Ana Lucia Jacomet. Thank you very much, Ana Lucia.
Thank you, dear Alex. We are grateful to welcome our keynote speaker, Mr. Stephen Bureau, Deputy to the Director of the ITU Telecommunication Development Bureau since March 2020. He's an experienced regulator with more than 20 years of executive and senior management experience in regulatory bodies in the Caribbean region. Prior to joining ITU, Mr. Bureau was Chief Executive Officer of the Utilities Regulation and Competition Authority in Bahamas. Prior, he served in senior management roles. He also has experience as attorney and practitioner law at multinational firms, specializing in information technology and telecommunications law. Thank you very much for your precious time and for joining us today. Please, Mr. Bureau, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be with you here today. Also a pleasure to hear the opening remarks by the moderator, Alex. As someone also from well, in my case, small island developing states, I certainly share your view that the focus really needs to be on those countries that need help the most. Distinguished parliamentarians, esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here today to address you on behalf of the International Telecommunication Union. For those who aren't familiar with the ITU, it is the UN specialized agency dealing with information and communication technologies, what we now refer to more as digital generally. And here to speak really on the kinds of tools that digital brings and the risks and approaches that you need to take in relation to introducing digital to your development journey and combating corruption. For what it's worth, that's probably the last time I'll use that specific word, because I certainly, as a UN specialized agency, we don't want to, in the technology space, I'd like to focus on the technology. Our rapidly digitizing world offers various opportunities, but it also presents an array of challenges, especially as we undergo the transition from offline to online. Just 3 years ago, we marked the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, a milestone that indicated 12 overarching commitments. And these included the imperative of digital transformation or digital cooperation and nurturing stronger, more dynamic engagements with parliaments. The Secretary General's Our Common Agenda report is driving us collectively toward the Summit of the Future that will take place next September. And these goals envisage a future with transparent governance, fortified by digital tools, and we can't achieve this without fairness and accountability. At a global level, the roles that parliamentarians play in lawmaking and governmental oversight is key. Parliamentarians formulate our laws, scrutinize government policies, and ensure consistent implementation of international treaties that shape the future. But our future is digital, so it is critical to equip parliamentarians with the technology-driven tools and knowledge that will promote and enhance accountability and ensure good governance. Our strides toward this goal have to be tailored to individual as well as national contexts, but with a global harmonization of efforts. When we talk about these digital tools, just want to give you an idea of what they can actually concretely offer. For example, ITU works with many governments on e-governance platforms that centralize public services and can play a critical role in reducing bureaucratic barriers and the potential spaces where corruption might succeed. With the added integration of biometric verification and secure digital identities, we can ensure that public resources reach their intended beneficiaries and implement oversight that would reduce leakages or misappropriation. Digital auditing systems that constantly monitor and report on public fund usage can also help to ensure accountability. We can use blockchain technology to provide transparent, immutable ledger systems. And by integrating blockchain into procurement and public spending systems, we can ensure that every transaction is transparent, accountable, and traceable. Additionally, artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms can be employed to analyze vast amounts of data that relate to public contracts and tenders, flagging discrepancies or patterns that may be indicative of failures in accountability. These systems can be proactive, and they can give us alerts and alert us even before any unlawful acts occur. Digital systems can also be used to enhance the quality of decision-making at all levels within government. Their ability to use data, coupled with the analytical power of artificial intelligence and machine learning to identify needs, analyze trends, and to formulate effective policy interventions is perhaps unparalleled. So we stand at the brink of a potential golden age, powered by digital technologies, helping to deliver good governance and the efficient allocations of resources nationally and globally. This will drive the achievement of the sustainable goals. However, we must understand that those same efficiencies achieved through the use of digital to promote good governance and accountability can also be used by bad actors to promote their agendas. We must not overlook that with the increase in implementation of digital solutions, online and cybersecurity risks are on the rise and provide new opportunities for some of the very things we're trying to safeguard. Implementing strong cybersecurity measures is essential to safeguard sensitive government data and enhance public trust in your parliamentary digital initiatives, and to ensure the protection of nations and your societies as you embark on digital journeys. As we're on the brink of the UN Summit of the Future, we also have to turn our attention to the future citizens of the world, our children and youth, who are destined to become the leaders of tomorrow and the beneficiary of the work we do today. For a child, learning digital skills and accessing ICTs in a safe and meaningful way means access to education, to information that is trustworthy, and the opportunity to develop critical thinking, problem solving, and creativity in a digitally connected world. So while these benefits are numerous, protecting children in the online realm has become a societal imperative. The online space has become a breeding ground for exploitation, cyberbullying, and exposure to inappropriate content. As parliaments utilize technology to enhance their transparency and collaboration, they must ensure that their digital initiatives prioritize the safety and well-being of young internet users. In today's digital age, cybersecurity, online child protection, and the myriad of risks that accompany the online realm are not just isolated concerns. These are integral components of broader discussions surrounding technology and governance. And by integrating these protections into technology-driven strategies, parliaments can create an environment that is conducive to transparency and partnership, all while fortifying a nation's digital resilience and increasing the safety or ensuring the safety of vulnerable members of society. ITU is mindful of the fact that many nations, especially LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDS, lack the foundational digital tools and digital skills that are required for this area. Developing these tools and skills across all sectors of societies is key to building an inclusive digital society, and nowhere is that more evident and important than in relation to those who govern societies. We must build societies where every individual, irrespective of gender, age, ability, socioeconomic status, or geographical location, can engage, participate, and actively contribute. And we must ensure that we put in place the protections that prevent bad actors from taking advantage of these digital societies. At ITU, we emphasize the importance of mainstreaming ICTs and digital accessibility requirements, standards, and universal design principles across all socioeconomic sectors, especially within legislative and government bodies, to ensure that even the most vulnerable among us are not left behind and that those who lead us have the tools they need to make this possible. So ITU supports governments in your efforts to develop national cybersecurity, child online protection, accessibility, and other government and e-government policies, strategies, and frameworks. Governments, as the custodians of society, bear a profound responsibility to ensure that society is inclusive. So every law, policy, strategy, or regulation that is enacted must consider the voices and needs of all and ensure that no one is left behind. As parliamentarians, you hold the keys to an inclusive digital future. And by creating spaces where everyone's perspectives are valued, we not only uphold the principles of democracy, but foster a sense of collective ownership in digital destinies. A core objective of ITU's work in our member states is helping to build the capacity in governments and populations to ensure that member states are able to build an inclusive, fair, and safe global digital society, as this is the surest path towards achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Our capacity building efforts span many of the areas you'll be discussing to enable digital transformation. And we're excited to help you as parliamentarians as you work to achieve that contribution to development and governance of your societies. Let me take this opportunity to commend platforms like this virtual roundtable initiated by GOPAC and UNITAR, as these are invaluable in sharing knowledge, cooperating and collaborating, as we are today, to address the thematic importance of technologies for parliamentarians. In conclusion, as we stand on the threshold of the UN Summit of the Future, let our shared vision be one of unity and diversity, and let's champion technologies that empower and platforms that include. Together, let's enact a world free from discrimination, full of opportunities, but most importantly, protected to ensure accountability and good governance in the interests of all. Thank you for your attention, and I pass the floor back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your inspiring insights, Mr. Bilho. We truly appreciate it. Now, it's a pleasure to introduce you, Mr. Nikhil Zet, UN Assistant Secretary General and Executive Director of UNITAR since June 2015. During his long career with the UN since 1993, he has served from different positions, including as the Director of the Division for Sustainable Development at UNDESA in New York, Special Assistant and Chief of Office to the Undersecretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, Chief of the Policy Coordination Branch in the Division for ECOSOC Support and Coordination. Before joining the UN Secretariat, he was diplomat for India since 1980. We appreciate also your valuable time. Mr. Zet, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ana Lucia, and I hope I'm audible to everyone here. I wanted to say I'm a little apologetic for having joined you after the wonderful keynote speech that was given by Stephen just now. And he has said many nice things about where we are going and the scope of what we are going to do. But I am here essentially to welcome you all warmly to this virtual roundtable, Parliaments using technologies for combating corruption. We all know of the pernicious impact of corruption on our societies, on our economies, and on our systems of governance. It's taking new forms and shapes every day, especially in our digital world, where we find new forms of corruption and new forms of misinformation, disinformation, which are eroding public trust, which are undermining democratic institutions, and are a real impediment, more than a help, sometimes I feel, in the realization of the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, technologies, when are used in a friendly fashion, will play an instrumental role with a large number of benefits and the impact and impetus they can give to development. In fact, I keep narrating the story of my participation in the General Assembly and the High-Level Political Forum last year, where in a sea of pessimism, the only optimism was around things digital, including digital cooperation and the boost digital economies can get, including by things like financial inclusion, of course, all contingent on a whole lot of underliers, including bridging the digital divide and so on. But today's world has a good understanding of the role of technologies and its relationship with corruption. And technology as a means, or at least mitigating the negative causes and effects of corruption on people's lives and the environment. Parliaments, as we all know, play a crucial role through the adoption of laws and the public budget, as well as oversight of laws and policies and the implementation recommendations coming from the signing and ratification of international treaties. We are heading into the World UN Summit of the Future, and that's going to take place in September 2024. We are still a year away, and what's going to happen in the General Assembly this year, particularly on the SDG Summit at its midpoint review, will give a peek into what expectations member states and all other multi-stakeholders have in the Summit of the Future for next September. And it gives a good runway for all of us to prepare a little better for what we want out of the Summit of the Future. We have focused on one aspect so far, many aspects, but the one which has grabbed our attention the most is the one on digital cooperation, which is focusing on strengthening digital capacity, including for citizens, and including in the countries that Stephen mentioned, the least advantaged and the most distressed countries, which in UN's code language are called the countries in special situations. With roundtables such as these, we hope to raise awareness and empower parliaments and related advisors and other stakeholders on the use and opportunities of technology, digital cooperation, and partnership for building better societies, relatively freer from corruption and grounded in democratic values and governance principles. Strengthening knowledge in this regard also paves the way towards more systematic engagement from parliaments in the occasion of the, as stated during the declaration of the 75th anniversary of the United Nations in June 2020. Parliaments have a lot of functions, and of course, one of the very important ones is the protection of human rights and enhanced transparency, accountability, public participation, with special attention to those who are furthest away, the marginalized geographically, marginalized economically, and those who are becoming invisible in many societies. Any effort in this regard through the use and understanding of technologies should be driven by specific country situations and national circumstances. And these need to be better coordinated, better funded, and better utilized. We strongly in UNITAR believe on the impact knowledge dissemination has for transforming lives of individuals and, of course, transforming societies. We need to do a lot in the area of these transformations, and the creation of spaces and initiatives to raise awareness, such as this event, represents an opportunity to enhance capabilities towards a culture of learning. I have been participating in several of the preparatory processes relating to the Summit of the Futures, and I see in my political antenna that there is a certain cachet around the Summit of the Futures. People are buying into the summit like never before, whether it's civil society or business or academia. Everyone is enthused by this prospect, not only of bringing multilateralism and UN into the 21st century much more robustly, but also for looking at the exponential pace of change in today's world and how to harness that for the noble objectives of the United Nations. I express my appreciation to GOPAC, to the Global Organization of Parliamentarians Against Corruption, for their commendable efforts in combating corruption. I had the pleasure of visiting them, and I wish you the greatest success in your endeavors, and I hope you have a significant learning experience through the active learning and with the engagement of parliaments and parliamentarians through our partnership. So thank you, Andalusia. Thank you, participants, and back to you, Andalusia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Seth. Now it's a pleasure to welcome Dr. Nasser Alzane. He has been a member of GOPAC since 2002 and was its chair from 2008 to 2013. He's also the vice chairman of the International Forum for Islamic Politics, headquartered at Jakarta, Indonesia, and the chairman of Synergy Corporation Consultancy Company, a prominent management consultancy company in Kuwait. He is an assistant professor of business at the Kuwait College for Business. Formerly, Dr. Alzane was a member of the Parliament of Kuwait and chaired several committees. Please, Dr. Alzane, the floor is yours.
It's me great pleasure as a GOPAC member to work with you. We have signed an agreement in 2023. This is the first cooperation between us. We're here together to discuss a key issue. I'd like to welcome all the participants from the World Bank, from the ITU, and all the other distinguished guests from the Mexican Parliament and the Parliament of Mozambique. Can you hear me? Can you hear the English translation? Or would you like me to speak in English? Would you like me to speak in English? First of all, I would like to tell you that I used to be a legislator, a member of the parliament since 1992 until 2009. I've worked in the Kuwaiti, in the parliament of my country until 2009. But before I accessed this meeting, I had some technical issues. This is due to my need to improve my technological skills, if I may say so. Using technology is of the utmost importance. But first of all, let me tell you about GOPAC. That was established in 2002. It has 62 axes. It is an organization that brings together members of parliaments from across the globe. We provide courses. We have provided UNITAR with the available materials so that we can reinforce cooperation between our two organizations. We work on parliamentary scrutiny, raising the awareness on parliamentarians' role, economic development, and so on and so forth. We have 7 guides that were drafted in cooperation with international organization, with Revenue Watch, with so many international organizations that took part in drafting those guides. As I mentioned, the guides will provide us with a training course that will be given to any member of the parliament who is interested in going through such a training. What we do is that we provide support with the different members of parliaments who are faced with corruption, who are marginalized. Some parliamentarians have suffered a lot while combating corruption. The other issue that we work on is that we lead the action against corruption across the globe. let's not forget that parliamentarians, whenever we say an MP, it's not really a synonym of anti-corruption parliamentarian. They are usually faced with suspicion. And so what we do is that we provide support. We work with so many organizations. Now, speaking about technology, and let me tell you about a personal experience. My first time in a parliament in 1992, I used to work as a secretariat of the Ministry of Education in my country. What I wanted first was to achieve those aspirations I had before becoming a parliamentarian. I asked the government, or I submitted a draft of a law I deemed important to provide reforms in education and a better service. I try to make the administrative paperwork for the citizen easier and provide them with yellow pages in order to make the public service more accessible to the citizen, to the regular citizen. This was what we wanted to achieve in 1992. In 2023, we no longer speak of yellow pages. We have technology now, and that radically changed everything. Things have changed. We're talking about e-governance. We're talking about different technological tools. What is the impact of those tools on our parliaments? The first impact is to every approach, every policy implemented by government in a transparent way, and to record in transparency every single action or initiative taken by the government. Every government speaks lengthily about transparency, but they provide no data, no reliable data for that to speak about transparency, or they lack the technological tools to provide and guarantee such transparency, which is the result of a study conducted by an international group. The question was, is technology really useful? Is it really used by government? And how efficient can the use of technology make government work in the future? We try not to use technology as a slogan, but in action in our everyday life. As a parliamentarian, I used to meet my citizens every day. 50 to 60 citizens would come every week, and I would tell them what we did, what we achieved, what I voted on, or what I voted for or against, and we provided that debate, that rich debate every day. But this is a good model, but I would have preferred to have the social media platforms to share more information, more knowledge with different citizens in my country, in different areas across the globe. Why not? This would make a parliamentarian's job easier and life easier. We have seen people use social platforms, and parliamentarians are no exception. They could, for example, Google a law that is implemented in a different country. They could send a request or an inquisition or a question to any governmental department if they would like to be provided with further information. Technological skills, when we talk about those, we need to have an agenda, a schedule on how to use them in governmental work on a daily basis. We cannot talk about a parliamentarian using technology while his government is not using that same technology or is still resorting to outdated tools and resources to provide the so-called transparency. We have what we call, it's your right to know, Snapchat is used to provide information on what a given parliamentarian is doing, on how he's working, and we've seen that people are eager to follow what everyone is doing on social platforms, on Twitter or on Snapchat. It's not something particular to the youngsters, and here I'd like to hail the efforts of UNITAR and the different organizations who are present here with us today. This is only the beginning of a joint effort. We hope that we will be able in the future to bring more stakeholders. I hope that this will be a successful beginning, and I hope that you understood my intervention in English. Thank you, UNITAR. Thank you for the organizations, and thank you to our dear panelists who accepted to join us on this journey. Thank you.
Shukran.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alzane. We're truly happy that you finally made it. Now I give the floor back to our director, Mr. Alex Mejia.
Thank you very much indeed to Dr. Alzane, to Mr. Seth, and to Mr. Berreau of ITU, our sincere appreciation for giving the proper opening to this virtual roundtable. Now, it is my great pleasure to welcome the group of panelists that we will have from this point onwards. It's quite unique an array, as you will see, we are the participants. We have 2 parliamentarians and 2 experts, literally experts on these topics. First, you will get to hear from Dr. Daniel Ortega Nieto, who is with the World Bank. Then Dr. Joram Duri, who is with Transparency International. Then from Senator Minerva Hernandez, who is part of the Chamber of Senate, the Senate of the Mexican Congress. And then from the Honorable Antonio Augusto Eduardo Navarrete, who's also a member of parliament from Mozambique. So quite a unique array of speakers. And I would like now to offer the floor to the first one of them, Dr. Daniel Ortega Nieto, Senior Public Sector Specialist at the World Bank in Indonesia. Dr. Ortega, the floor is yours. We are very pleased that you are with us. Welcome.
Thank you very much. First of all, to UNITAR and to GOPAC for the invitation. Let me share my screen. And I'd like to take the opportunity, these 7 minutes I have with you, to share some insights for parliamentarians, basically, first on 3 key issues where I believe you have a lot to say and do. So first, with respect to budget processing. Second, with oversight, particularly supreme audit institutions. And third, the legislative process itself. So let me give you a few examples and then wrap it up with a call to action where I think you could have a particularly helpful impact. So first of all, parliamentarians have a huge impact in the budget process. And there are a few examples in the initial formulation of budgeting that make use of technologies Not necessarily the most sophisticated, but it's an important step in the right direction. So one important aspect in the budget formulation is transparency about lobbying activities. And a few countries, for example, Chile or Ireland, have been publicizing agendas and meetings of not only public officials, but also parliamentarians. And this is a step in the right direction, since it gives civil society more access to information and transparency with respect to whom the representatives and executives are meeting with. The second one is the possibility to do budget trackers. And there was a bigger trend in the initial 2000s. Hopefully it's coming back again. But the idea is that once parliaments approve, since they play a critical role in budget formulation, they are able to use their ability to georeference budget data showing where funds have been allocated. And again, give civil society organizations and citizens more clarity with respect of where public resources are being allocated. This can be even a bit more sophisticated with some technologies that report both financial and physical progress of major capital investments. And a particularly important data point, which unfortunately is not seen everywhere, is reporting on cost overruns. And this is a critical piece of information that with the help of technology could be captured and support the fight against corruption. Let me stop a little bit more with respect to budget execution and oversight, because here is where the World Bank has provided a lot of innovation lately. We've developed a system called the Governance Risk Assessment System, or GRAS. It's a system that builds on artificial intelligence and as of today identifies over 200 red flags of potential fraud in public expenditures. And we've piloted this at subnational levels in Brazil. I obviously won't go through the 200 red flags, but these analytical categories give you a sense of the areas where the GRAS can support supreme audit institutions, or certainly prosecutors or anti-corruption agencies. We have some fantastic resources at the subnational level, and we're in the process of scaling up. I cannot give you right now a demo of the system, but needless to say, as I mentioned, there are 200 red flags, and the user can select different filters and identify firms, politicians, even conditional cash transfers beneficiaries, for example, that are partners of a particular firm and are receiving public funding. We believe this will be a game changer in the fight against corruption. And the World Bank is, again, working in this in Brazil and other countries. Let me go to the third example. And I'm a firm believer that the best way to start is cleaning up one's own house. And there's a particular good example that I like from Brazil, where civil society built an algorithm, a little robot called Rosie. And what Rosie does is that it scrutinizes parliamentarian expenses. And Rosie identifies suspicious transactions and automatically communicates the result to citizens and Congress via tweets. As you can see, a snapshot of Rosie just from yesterday. And it invites citizens to corroborate or rule out suspicions and ask members of Congress to justify expenses. Of course, this is possible because a country like Brazil has a lot of public data. And that leads me to my final point, which is a call to action to parliamentarians. Because technology certainly provides tools, which, however, without adequate regulatory frameworks, do not guarantee any type of success. And parliamentarians, of course, can directly influence regulatory frameworks and facilitate the use of technology. And, you know, it's needless to mention that technology, again, is a tool, but if you don't have the ability to use those technologies, and if you don't have the data and information required to feed those technologies, unfortunately, the fight against corruption won't go very far. And there are at least 5 key areas where parliamentarians could enhance the work. The first one, as mentioned, was lobbying, that it has a direct effect on the work parliamentarians do, but obviously the executive and judiciary as well. There's a lot of work to be done with respect to conflict of interest through the GRAS, we have identified that despite some activities not being illegal, the potential conflict of interest is huge, and new technologies and the relevant data can support better policies. The third area is the ability to create registries of beneficial ownership. So in a nutshell, who is the key owner of a particular firm or business, so that with the adequate algorithms and data, one can identify potential issues of corruption. The fourth one, of course, is access to information. You know, it's not enough to have the technologies again, but you really need to have the ability and access to such information. And finally, what seems not to be particularly relevant, but it does make a difference, is the way in which data is published. Some people say that forget about PDFs because it's a nightmare to treat and work with data. So you have ideally to support to publish data in machine readable formats. I will leave with this, and I'm happy to come back in the discussion and give additional examples, but I know we're running a bit late, so I just wanted to leave you with those reflections. Thank you very much.
Thanks to Mr. Ortega from the World Bank for a very, very relevant, short, but very relevant presentation. I myself will remember Grass and Rosie for a long time, but we will go back to you as soon as we finish the rest of the presentation. So thank you again, Daniel. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Jorun Duri of Transparency International, who will be helping us with his own presentation. And at the same time, remember that he's a horizontal accountability specialist. Dr. Duri has the floor now. Welcome very much. Can you hear us, Dr. Duri?
Sorry, can you, sorry, I'm just connecting. Hello, everyone. Just sharing my screen, if you can allow me.
Of course.
Yeah, but I just want to thank UNITAR and GOPAC for the invitation. So my presentation will also be focusing more on how parliaments can use technology to fight corruption, but also maybe looking more from the side of like oversight, which is, I think, is the important one. Sorry, for some reason I cannot share my screen. Sorry about that.
Very good. We see your presentation now.
We cannot hear you.
You're muted.
Yeah, my apologies. There has been some challenges, but I think now I'm back online and you can see me. Great. So just jumping straight into the topic of today, how parliaments can use technology to combat corruption. I would like to start my presentation by highlighting three roles of parliament, which are oversight, representation, as well as lawmaking. Technology plays an important role in enhancing the capabilities of parliaments in all these three core functions. However, for the purposes of this presentation, I will zoom in and focus on how technology can support the oversight activities of Parliament and their contribution to combating corruption. In addition, we also focus on how technology is used to enhance transparency, accountability, and integrity of parliaments, including oversight of individuals running for parliamentary positions. I think this will also answer a question that I saw in the chat on what are the measures that are in place to enhance transparency and accountability of parliaments. Now, to start with, through oversight, parliaments contribute to anti-corruption through various ways. This includes enhancing transparency by approving and monitoring the use of public resources throughout the budget process, thereby reducing opportunities for corruption. It's also about scrutiny. It's also in scrutinizing financial reports from government and following up on audit reports. They can also receive complaints from citizens on corruption cases, for instance, through petitions, and take action, such as summoning government officials to address allegations of corruption. And also in terms of like parliamentary committees can also be involved in like investigations, including of corruption cases with input from the public as well as from experts. So in all these different oversight activities, parliaments can use technology to support their effectiveness in holding governments to account. This could be technology within parliament, which helps members of parliament to do their job more effectively, or it can be existing digital platforms from other stakeholders, which parliamentarians can take advantage of to further their efforts in the fight against corruption. I've just highlighted four main sort of areas like which parliaments can use like technology to further the fight against corruption. The first one is on budget monitoring, where the capabilities of parliaments to oversee government spending can be improved, by the use of, digital tools where there's like already information or standardized data, which parliaments can use to, for example, review budget or to understand more on like budget estimates, etc. And an example is the US Budget Office, which has these interactive tools on budget reviews and estimates to support the congressional budget process. There are also some external platforms that parliamentarians can also take advantage of for opening to open platforms which monitor budget implementation and identify red flags. For example, there's the Open Spending, which is an open platform to search, visualize, and analyze fiscal data in the public sphere of 32 countries. On public procurement, which is a hotspot for corruption risk and also of interest to oversight actors, there are some digital platforms that can also be useful. For example, Prozoro in Ukraine, which is a fully online public procurement platform for procurement data. In South Africa, there's Vuleka Mali, which contains data on national and provincial budgets, including procurement monitoring. And most interestingly, it also has these options on like what citizens can do to report corruption in procurement process. Then moving on to e-participation, which has also become a common instrument by governments across the world in trying to engage with citizens. We have e-petition services by Parliament, for example, in countries like Australia, the United Kingdom, and Germany, which are also like very important for parliamentarians to get information from citizens or even on issues which are related to oversight. And also the collection of evidence by parliamentary committees remotely via written submission or even surveys, audio and video chats also helps in that way. And an example is the Scottish Parliament, which has this outreach services team, which collects evidence from different sources and people who, for example, might not be able to attend Parliament for one reason or another. And lastly, also an important area is on corruption reporting platforms. For example, we have I Pay the Bribe platform, which can also help parliamentarians in identifying hotspots of corruption and take action. We also have these whistleblowing channels such as Global Leaks, which also play an important role in like as a software that can be used to for reporting of corruption. And Transparency International's chapter in Guatemala has also developed this geoportal for communities of anti-corruption activists through the country to increase access to relevant information and reports from citizens. So this allows also parliamentarians to be able to get more information on like on related to corruption and what anti-corruption activists are working on. Now, moving on to looking more at oversight of parliaments, we see that while parliaments can use technology to enhance their role in fighting corruption, it is also important that they are also held to account by stakeholders using technology. A few examples that I can give is on open data platforms by parliaments, which also are important in ensuring that citizens have access to information on activities of parliament. We also have parliamentary monitoring organizations, such as Zalendo, such as I Have Right to Know in Poland, which also play an important role. And lastly, also in terms of financial transparency and integrity in decision-making, where we have like online platforms where parliamentarians can declare assets or can also even discuss issues related to lobbying or developing activities that can also be important for stakeholders. So I'm also just going to leave you with just a short video on what Transparency International has been working on.
Do you know who funds political parties in your country? Or how much money a politician makes as a side income? This information is hard to find, as it is often dispersed and difficult to access. When available, it usually is complicated for machines to read it or has errors, making it not really accessible for citizens. How can journalists and oversight agencies hold politicians to account if they do not know who funds them, who they meet, and what could influence their decision-making? Transparency International has developed the online tool Integrity Watch that makes relevant data accessible. You can search, rank, and filter information on a wide range of data, such as lobby meetings, donations to political parties, the financial interests of politicians, or their reported side activities. The data comes from the websites of the European Commission, the European Parliament, and of national institutions in different EU countries. The Integrity Watch platforms are useful for detecting possible conflicts of interests, revolving doors, and other political integrity risks, and they contribute to transparency and integrity in the EU and in national politics, and promote the much-needed participation of society. Learn more at Transparency.
Great. So I'm happy to share more resources and also the slides on how parliaments can use like technologies to fight corruption, and also how technology can be used to enhance transparency and accountability in parliaments. Thank you so much. I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards. Back to you.
Thanks to you, Dr. Dury. It's quite impressive. And both of you, Mr. Ortega and Dr. Dury, you have shared a wealth of information that I am sure will help us to leverage information technology and data and all these beautiful platforms in order to increase transparency, and particularly for members of parliament. I think this is quite unique, and both of you as experts in your field representing the World Bank and Transparency International are indeed empowering us. So thank you. Now, let me go to the second part of this virtual roundtable now with two parliamentarians, two important parliamentarians that will be sharing their views on how technology can indeed be leveraged by parliaments to combat corruption successfully. First of them is the Honorable Minerva Hernandez, a senator of the Chamber of Senators of the Mexican Congress, a great friend of UNITAR and the United Nations, and it's my great pleasure to offer her the floor. Bienvenida.
Thank you very much, honourable members of UNITAR, GOPAC, fellow parliamentarians, members of Organisation International Against the Corruption, and also those who are present today. I am member of the Chamber of Deputies at the Mexican Congress, and also I am chairman in Mexico for GOPAC, and it's an honor for me to take part in this very important quest, how to combat corruption from the parliaments in order to achieve our objectives through the digital technologies. The 21st century has seen an exponential growth of digital transformation that has changed the way we communicate and make decisions. If we use these technologies and tools in the right way, they are powerful weapons against corruption. I'd like to share with you some positive and successful experiences that we have had from the Mexican Congress, and especially from the Senate of the Republic regarding this topic, as well as the challenges that we have ahead of us. Within the model of open parliament, technology and digital information enables the four main pillars: transparency, access to information, accountability, citizen participation, and ethics and transparency. As a Mexican Congress, 25 years ago, we established this channel, TV channel of the Congress, in order to broadcast the sessions live of the parliaments and senates, as well as the work carried out within the organism. This tool has been adjusted by means of the platforms that we have in social media, mainly YouTube and Twitter, and making the most of this digitalization and building a repository of contemporary history in the country. Furthermore, we have achieved that every single document used in the policy making have been saved and accessible electronically, so that every citizen can access it. They can download them for their own information and benefit, as well as for research in the future. These resources and measures not only promote transparency, but they also foster the participation by the citizens, developing that way a more inclusive parliament. Another experience came out from the COVID-19 pandemic and the need by the Mexican parliament in order to be more accessible, thanks to real-time digital platforms that enabled audio-video communication and that enabled the modification of the policies in order to enable biometric measures to enable the policy-making work remotely in an accurate, reliable way through the documents provided by the Parliament, and fostering this way transparency and accountability. Another benefit and application has been the all members of the Mexican Parliament and Congress. We are obliged to report annually our assets, our income, and to declare our personal, family, or business interests that could hamper our public and governmental functions. This is carried out through a digital platform that carries out a very wide scope of transparency that we call the National Transparency Platform. We'd also like to highlight the fantastic external work by an external federation, a third party that carries out an audit, and it's keeping itself at the vanguard of the tax return and transparency through electronic audits, accessible by the public, open source, as well as the application of AI resources to identify anomalies and patterns and trends in order to get ahead of any potential corruption. We can see that these fundamental steps are very important, but we still have a lot of room for improvement. From Europe, we believe that the Mexican Congress is not making the most of the digital platforms available in order to combat corruption. Therefore, we want to implement online systems to enable every citizen to whistleblow any corruption act and to use the latest cyber platform in order to protect and ensure the safety of the victim and to enable the communication of these corruption acts to the corresponding authorities. We're also in process of the automation of the public procedures and workflows, the use of blockchain to protect the public funds in order to reduce the potential corruption in every transaction, since blockchain enables the registering and the tracking of every single transaction, which in itself will be able to contribute to reduce to the corruption in these areas. Of course, technology is not enough. We need the human factor. We need the full cooperation of our public officials so that they become acquainted and make full use of these digital platforms and tools in order to continue using them on the highest ethical and transparency codes. Corruption cannot be eradicated only through technology. However, technology can enable us and help us to prevent, to foresee, and to be able to combat corruption acts. I'd like to do a call out for international cooperation so that parliamentarians all over the world share their experiences, successes, and failures in the use of technology to combat this huge problem. That way, we can strengthen our systems and we protect mutually. International unity and cooperation are essential in order to achieve a fairer and more transparent world. As a senator and Chamber of Deputies of the Mexican Congress, I want to highlight the commitment of Mexico. Corruption is a block and an obstacle for justice, democracy, and freedom. But with courage, with the will to do it, and the digital tools that we have, we will be able to conquer this wicked enemy. Technology is a very powerful weapon, but human will, the desire for justice and equality, will eventually promote a deep and lasting change. Thank you very much for your attention, and congratulations to the organizers of this event, and we send you a warm hug from Mexico.
Muchísimas gracias, honorable senadora y amiga. It's quite a pleasure to have a person of your stature with us today. I sincerely thank you. Now, as mentioned, dear colleagues, we also have the support and participation of another esteemed member of parliament, the Honorable Antonio Augusto Eduardo Namburete from Mozambique, who is the Vice President of the African Parliamentarian Network Against Corruption, APNAC. It's my great pleasure to offer him the floor. Excellency, welcome.
Thank you very much. And I must start by thanking UNITAR and GOPAC for inviting me to participate in this important roundtable. I had prepared a PowerPoint presentation to discipline myself to stick to the 7 minutes that I was allocated. And if it can be put up, I would appreciate it. Thank you. We can move on. So my presentation will really try to take you back for the better understanding of the many who are following us on this platform. Since corruption, it varies from different countries. It has so many formats and forms. There's no unique definition of it, but it is a common understanding and a consensus that bribery, embezzlement, money laundering, nepotism, appropriation of public funds, those things are qualified as corruption. Now, we have to understand why those things are happening. Why are we having corruption in our many countries? There are many reasons why we're having corruption. One of them is it would be the lack of political will. We can also have the weak government structures that we have in place, especially in the less developed countries. We find that the weak government structures is very conducive to corruption. But above all, the issue of lack of transparency, accountability, consistency, and the use of discretionary powers of public officers, that is one of the points where we're having a lot of problems that it's very conducive to corruption. And the weak citizen participation also, which weakens the whole democratic system. Mm-hmm. Can move. So what can we do to respond to those issues that we have pointed out? Strengthening government structures definitely is one of the key issues. Increasing transparency and reducing the level of discretionary powers that the government officials do have. In doing so, we can increase the accountability of those public officials, and we can widen also the space for public participation. And how can we do this? Of course, everything that we can propose to do to curb corruption, it depends fundamentally on the leadership. We need a strong leadership, a committed leadership to fight corruption. And in also improving the structures of the government and the legislative measures that has to be taken so that technology can be useful to combat corruption. We have many technologies that can be used to combat corruption, namely the use of websites, cellular phones, automation of services, electronic tax collections, and the digitalization of the processes, that administrative process, judicial process, and so on. And the objective of this is to limit the interference of the human being in those processes. For example, in using website, we can publish the financial information, including the tenders, the contracts on the website. This will enhance transparency. Everyone will be able to know who is bidding, who is getting the tenders, why, what are the criteria. Everything will be done in the light. There's nothing that will be done in the dark. Websites also can be used to track budget and expenditure. If we can convince our governments to publish the budget and also publish the expenditure so that everyone can follow what is happening with the money, then we will be a step ahead in terms of improving transparency. At the same time, we will be improving the accountability. The automation of services is another instrument that can be used to reduce the level of human manual intervention in administrative and financial processes. Minimizing the space for discretion of public officers, that will increase consistency. Technology can also be used in the procurement processes. If we use automated processes in procurement, we reduce the level of interference of the human being in the process so that we can guarantee consistency in those processes. Technology also in tax collections can be an instrumental tool to increase efficiency, transparency, and will reduce the likelihood of corruption in the public service. When we use technology, for example, to pay salaries, we increase the efficiency, and we eliminate also the possibility of the existence of ghost employees. it facilitates also the accountability and the reporting process. Please. In most of African countries, cellular phone is the widely communication technology that is used on our side. The use of short message services, the SMS, it is widely used in Africa especially. That tool can be used to report many illicit behaviors, corruption practices, corruption in hospitals, corruption in traffic, and also, so because it's something that people have in their hand and they can use that to report such misbehavior. We can use also this small technology, the short message system, to allow the citizen to communicate occurrence of corruption in their constituencies. They can communicate with their members of parliament, their representative, to inform what is happening in their constituency. And the MPs also can use this very easy technology to mobilize the constituency, to mobilize the people against corruption. And the other technology that we find to be useful in reducing the occurrence of corruption is digitalization. Embracing a digital system, I mean, in the process, for example, of citizen identification, we reduce the level of occurrence of corruption because the process will all be digitalized. There will be less room for maneuver in terms of intervention of human action there. It can also be used in the judicial system, for example. All this piling of paper in the judicial system that allows also for some mismanagement and corrupt acts can be reduced if the processes are digitalized. The filing and the archiving and all these proceedings can be transformed into a digital, which will enable the reduce of workload and also reducing the opportunity for malpractices. Please. So in conclusion, I would say that as legislators, in our role of lawmakers and overseers of government activities, we can enforce legislation that will enable the government or require the government to move from the analog process, from the manual process into digitalization and electronics. That will allow us to ensure that government operations are run in a transparent manner, especially in terms of financial matters. When we can ensure that the government publish its budget and expenditure in a website, for example, we are able to allow the citizen to follow how the government is managing its fund, how the money is being spent. This would allow also the public to have access to crucial information regarding the finances of the states. It can help us in tracking the procurement processes. Through the publishing of this information on the website, everyone will be able to know to whom the contracts are being allocated, why they're being allocated, what are the criteria that are set for these tenders and so on. So technology can keep, the members of parliament in touch with their constituencies. It can keep their constituencies with their representatives and can allow also the constituencies to lodge complaints about corruption practices in the constituencies. Technology definitely is a very critical tool for advocacy campaigns against corruption. Definitely, this is a very crucial instrument in fighting corruption. But as I said at the beginning, all this will only make sense if there is political will on the side of the government officers who will then enable technology to work for the better in fighting against corruption. Thank you very much.
Thanks to the Honorable Dr. Antonio Augusto Eduardo Namburete from Mozambique for sharing quite a relevant presentation. Very much, thank you very much indeed, Honorable Parliamentarian. We will go now to a very short round of Q&A. I kindly request the four speakers to give us the answer in 1 or 2 minutes, because unfortunately we are running out of time. But this is a very important occasion, and we don't want it to go away without asking. So first, to Dr. Daniel Ortega Nieto from the World Bank, allow me to ask you a question, because I was very much impressed by Rosie and by GRASS, as I mentioned before. If I can invite all the participants that are listening today, if you will remember throughout the weeks and the months, even less and even less, because it's part of the human brain, I beg you to remember Rosie. And I beg you to remember Rosie because I find it to be very unique. And by the way, I'm just sharing my screen just to show what has been shown to us as well, and particularly to ask Mr. Ortega from the World Bank to comment a little on this thing. The title of this is Operation Love Melody, Serenata de Amor, which is quite a suggestive name, by the way. And this is an initiative of Open Knowledge Brazil, who's an organization, this organization I knew before, focus on research, investigations, civic participation, data management in schools, and alliances to improve transparency. But going back to Rosie, I just wanted to ask, and let me stop sharing my screen. I wanted to ask the World Bank and Dr. Daniel Ortega Nieto, how can we make, this is about media, not only social media. You mentioned Rosie on Twitter, which I'm a follower, but how can we persuade the whole of media, the whole of the media apparatus in a country to focus on this and to support it? Can you give us some ideas? Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. So it's a complicated question with certainly not a straightforward answer. But I think that the most important issue, if I have to say, is that we always have to remember that these are public resources that governments execute, right? So citizens have the right to know where they're being used to and what for. So if the media accept their role as communicators, as a bridge between power and citizens to a certain extent, then they have a role, a responsibility, I would even say, to put attention to where resources are going. And technologies such as Rosie's, like you correctly point out, developed by civil society in Brazil, or GRASS developed by the World Bank, can help, you know, put the radar into some of these issues. But in the end, it is parliamentarians, civil society, and the responsible public officials that have to take action and try to solve these complicated matters.
Thank you very much indeed. That's the way to go. And your comments will indeed guide us in this quest, which is a societal quest. Everyone has a role to play here. Let me now go also, unfortunately, and I apologize in advance, in a very succinct manner, a couple of minutes, to Dr. Duri from Transparency International. And to do so, and to present correctly my question to you, I'm sharing my screen again with I Paid a Bribe, right? And I invite every participant listening from very many countries, more than 250 of you, quite an honor to have a dedicated audience of parliamentarians, of people interested in parliaments combating anti-corruption. I wanted to ask Dr. Duri about I Paid a Bribe, and particularly on how to mobilize, because all of this takes funding, right? All of these require money. How to mobilize the private sector. So I asked a question already that Dr. Ortega answered rather comprehensively, and I thank him. Now, beyond media, I want to focus on the private sector, because the private sector, I regret to say, but most of you will understand, is very much involved into a bribe scheme. It takes two to tango, they say in English, right? So Dr. Duri, will you give us some comments on how to involve the private sector in this type of initiatives as we are showing on the screen?
Yeah, thank you very much, Alex. So that's a very interesting question. I think we are seeing that more and more there is need for us to involve businesses like private sector in the fight against corruption. One of the solid ways that I can talk about, importantly, when it comes to like ensuring that these sort of digital platforms reach citizens, reach private sector and also citizens is, first of all, it's in terms of sharing. I think this is where civil society organizations play an important role, in that there's like more sharing of on this different platforms, and also the fact that, I mean, I'll take an example of Transparency International. We have a program on business integrity. So it's like, how then can we reach out to citizens, to also to private businesses who are also involved in the fight, in these cases. But I'll say that, maybe just coming back on to the question again, I think that this is where there's need for many of us to get involved, different stakeholders getting involved in like how we can actually fight, like how we can involve businesses in these issues. I'll give you an example of some of the cases that not on I Paid a Bribe, but from other platforms as well, where if there are like several cases of corruption that are focused on the private sector, and then they are picked up by various stakeholders. One of the things that have actually been happening is that there is like more efforts which are focused on how, for example, it can be civil society organizations, it can be citizens putting concerted efforts to actually address some of the issues. I think at the moment I'm not quite aware if there's a specific platform that only focuses on businesses, but I think what I think will be very important is how we can bring civil society organizations and citizens to also just to be in the space where they can engage directly with businesses. I think that's something that is, I would say, is very key to bringing everyone on board in the fight against corruption. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Very much so, Dr. Duri. I thank you for that, for all the work that Transparency International is doing in this field. Now, allow me to go to Senator Hernandez from Mexico and to ask a question in English, and immediately I will say it also in Spanish to facilitate the life of the interpreters, but then of course she will answer and we need interpretation. Dear Senator Hernandez, this is about vulnerable populations, right? Or marginalized populations. So how can we actually bring on board in this global fight against corruption using technology, people that normally don't have access to technology? ¿Cómo pudiéramos, honorable senadora, sobre las poblaciones rurales, las poblaciones vulnerables que normalmente no tienen acceso a tecnología, cómo pudiéramos involucrarlos a ellos también en este cometido que nos ocupa hoy? ¿Cómo hacemos para la gente que no tiene conectividad para que sean parte de esto? Adelante y bienvenida nuevamente.
Good morning once again. I think that it's a very important point. Here in Mexico, we have collectivities that represent a huge rate of the population who are marginalized. Here, people have possibilities to be part of it through data sharing and information sharing, information that is of interest to them, and to access information, to communicate, and also to ask for some information of interest to them, be it by writing, electronically, and it's really, it can be a challenge to have the network coverage in the country. It's the case in Mexico, but we have some issues with the network coverage, but it's always reducing, and the gap is always getting smaller and smaller. And next year, we are having more people participating in the network, and we are always happy to listen to the concerns that they raise. And most of the territory is connected to internet, and we are planning to have more.
Muchísimas gracias. Thank you very much, Honorable Senator. And last but not least, the Honorable Eduardo Namburete. Excellency, let me ask you this question on how to protect whistleblowers. Let me ask you a question. You gave us a presentation which was very comprehensive, as I say, and I thank you again. But the main issue is that a whistleblower, someone feels very isolated, very vulnerable, and very alone, very lonely, while at the same time, technology can protect her or him. So can you give us some comments on how to use technology to protect whistleblowers? Thank you indeed.
Is that for me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
That's a very critical issue that many people who have information to convey to the authorities, but at the same time, they fear the repercussion of their action. So in order to protect them, we believe technology, at least it can keep those people from being known to the public, but at least having credibility to the information they are providing. Technology can allow you to provide information without exposing yourself. You can just present a credential that will make your information credible to the authority, but without exposing yourself. Definitely, this is the best way to ensure that the whistleblower can feel safe, because at least they are behind the space where they can be seen by the public or even by those who have been those who are being reported. So I would say this is the best way to ensure and give confidence to the whistleblowers that they can report corruption and still be protected, because they will not be known their identity or even their place of residence and so on.
Very much indeed. We thank the Honorable Member of Parliament from Mozambique. Quite a unique opportunity, as I say before, to have all of you here, decision makers at the center of this global quest, or specialists representing the highest stature when it comes to organizational arrangements and resources. So on behalf of UNITAR, it's been quite an honor to moderate this roundtable. The time is always short. I want to thank the 250 participants that have stayed with us. But before we go, it is very, very important to express our appreciation to GOPAC, the Global Organization of Parliamentarians Against Corruption, and of course, as it should be, to offer the floor to request closing remarks to His Excellency Dr. Faisal, Dr. Firas, who is the Executive Director of GOPAC. Dr. Firas, it's a pleasure to see you on the screen.
Pleasure, thank you. It is reciprocal, Alex. Thank you very much. And for everybody who has been here, for the organizers, I have to extend my gratitude and appreciation, and all the lecturers and the attendees. And I would like to extend my special regards and gratitude to our GOPAC members. This is our first cooperation during our leadership of GOPAC, and thank you for the generous support of UNITAR and being led by Alex and Nicholas Seth. Thank you very much. And for all the colleagues in UNITAR. I think, as everybody have mentioned, we have been always talking about how criminals and corrupt people are making use of technology in order to enhance their ways of getting illicit funds. But I think it's time for us, and especially parliamentarians, to use that technology to go back and to retaliate. In GOPAC, we have done one step which I consider very important, is that we have now an interactive website. It is something similar to the social media platforms where people can be members of GOPAC. And at the same time, we would be welcoming new members, and interaction is happening between different members on different subjects in order to make use and try to be beneficial from all the experiences of other countries, other organizations, other members of parliaments when it comes to fighting corruption. I think in addition to the cooperation with UNITAR, we can cooperate with all other international organizations and non-governmental organizations who share similar goals in fighting corruption. And using the digital forum is the way forward on that. So I welcome everybody to have a look also at our website and to join if you are not a GOPAC member yet. And thank you very much once again for this wonderful organization. And we will be looking to see you and to cooperate with UNITAR in future events. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Firas. UNITAR is very proud to have this most excellent partnership with the Global Organization for Parliamentarians Anti-Corruption, for anti-corruption under the leadership of Dr. Ali Ben Fetais Al-Marri, who's also a member of the Board of Trustees of UNITAR. So you can count on us in the future. To Dr. Nasser Al-Sani, it's always a pleasure to see you, Dr. Nasser. We count on you in the future as well. And to all of you distinguished speakers, our appreciation for the time and effort that you have invested into this virtual roundtable, and particularly now to the participants. Without you, this wouldn't be possible. Thank you very much for your interest in listening to these things, for your commitment to fight corruption, and particularly for your eagerness to understand better what is the role of parliaments in combating corruption. With that, again, on behalf of UNITAR, thank you very much. And it's my pleasure to conclude this webinar. Thank you, everyone. We wish you an excellent day ahead. Goodbye.